Okay, now we're going to talk about getting data collection out in the field. And I'm going to be talking about Google Forms, which is a great, free, easy way to put together in the cloud type of data solution. Has a lot of limitations too, anything free does. But I think this is a good way to get started on putting stuff together. We certainly learned a lot doing it this way. It was admittedly it was a test. We tried it to see if it would work. It did work, but also we realized where some of the gaps are. So the next iteration will hopefully have a better solution to it. So I'm going to flip my camera around, and then we're going to start on the taking a look at my computer screen. Okay. Okay, here we go. We're looking at my computer screen, obviously. And the first thing we're looking at is how you create a Google form. Now, I'm not going to take you through the whole process. It really is pretty intuitive. But what I wanted to show you is some of the data entry fields that we make. A pretty basic one that we start with is your data visit. And if you'll notice, there's a little red asterisk there that makes it a mandatory field. So in other words, as they're making the data entry, they have to enter that field or they can't go by it. The time the visit starts. And you'll notice these are text fields that they enter information in, and you can specify what format it has to be in. This one is radio buttons, for example, and try to use as much of that as possible, whereas a yes, no, or answers like that, so that, again, try to streamline the data entry as much as possible, minimize actually how much information they do have to enter in a text format. But some things obviously you have to, like the name of the occupant, the home phone address, all that sort of thing. Now, the nice thing about the Google Docs is this is the one that I made up for Washington, D.C. So obviously you can just narrow it down. They don't have to enter in all the cities. Just click on Washington, click on D.C. And you can also specify through a drop-down menu all the zip codes. So again, it reduces the errors quite a bit when there's already an established set of fields for them to pick from. Also, Washington asked us to add in ward numbers because that helped them in terms of with their elected officials identifying which ward it's in and that sort of stuff. Now, the data collection that we're doing is across a number of cities across the United States. So we really do need to standardize a lot of the information that we're gathering so that we can compare one city to the other and come up with a more comprehensive data analysis. So for example, in D.C., they had one called a row house. You know, duplex townhouse was the field for the other places. They commonly call it a row house, so we added that into the field there. But again, to keep it standard, and again, they pick one type of occupants here. Now, we also create pages, and I can't quickly and easily show you this, but the idea with the pages is depending on the answers, you can build in a logic flow. So say, for example, okay, let's scroll back up here. Is this reentry being made to correct a previous report, yes or no? Depending on your answer, it'll take you to somewhere else in the form. So that way they can skip over a lot of fields that aren't relevant for them to answer. Was entry possible? Yes or no? If entry wasn't possible, it's going to skip over certain fields and take you to this one. If it wasn't possible, why not? And then once you enter this, it's going to take you to the end. Because there's no reason for them to keep on going through, filling out a lot of information that, obviously, since they couldn't make entry, it doesn't matter. Again, you can specify the unit numbers here to simplify the data entry. Was it engine 1, engine 2, engine 3? The position of the people. And I'm not going to go through every single field in here, but I think what I want to show you is the idea that, again, you can use drop-downs, you can use radio buttons. What I brought up here is how you actually edit the question itself, and it gives you a number of different options. Do you want text, paragraph text, multiple choice, check boxes, a scale, a grid, depending on the information you're looking for. And you can make it a required question or not, which has really helped a lot in terms of the quality of the data. When they were using just paper forms, they would skip over a lot of these things, and a lot of information was missing. Again, a way you can customize this is depending on the smoke alarms being used in a particular jurisdiction, you can put the specific name, brand, and model of everything in there to make it easier for them to make the data entry. So again, this is really a pretty simple way of creating forms to collect the data online. Demographic information you can put in here as well. And so what I'm showing you is, again, this is on the back end, this is how you create the form. Okay, so form's been created, and what happens to it? Well, the data, they're out there in the field. They can access this information on their iPad by pulling it down from the cloud. It's not resident on their iPad. They're accessing a web page and putting this information in. So what happens once they make that information and that data entry, it goes into a spreadsheet, an online spreadsheet. Very simple one here, and you're just looking at an example of one right here, a demo one that I made up. You can see it timestamps it here as to what date and time they made the entry, the date of the visit, time it starts, and all those fields that I was showing you on that form show up as separate columns here on a spreadsheet. As you can see, it's fairly comprehensive. A lot of information can be captured. Now, the nice thing about this is this gives you the ability to take this data, and you can look at it right here online. You can export it as an Excel spreadsheet, and once it's into an Excel spreadsheet, you can really do a lot of things with it. You can turn it into a Microsoft Word document if you want to create reports. It can get imported into database management systems. There's just a lot of things that you can do with it once it gets into this form. And also, I think one of the bigger advantages of doing it this way is that you as an administrator have the ability to look at it as it's being done in real time. And we discovered this too with a number of these jurisdictions, that some of the questions may not be answered as well as they should have been, and we realized we hadn't phrased it as well. So we would change how the question was structured. Or we would take a look and say, boy, they're skipping over these fields, we need to make them mandatory. Or if you want to customize stuff, you can customize it easily. And the changes I make sitting at my desk here instantly show up out in the field to anybody using this on their iPad. And the other point I want to make too is that this isn't just for iPads. Any web-connected device can access these forms, can access this information. And so it can be a smartphone, it can be an iPad, it can be a laptop, it can be a desktop computer. Anything you get on the web can access this information. Now, there's also security built in. For example, this spreadsheet that you're looking at right here, you can put different levels of access on there so that not everybody and their brother can look at this information. You can just limit it to certain administrators. And you can also limit it as to whether they just view it or they can view and edit it. One thing that we've learned is really certainly minimizing how many people can edit the information. Do they really need to, and do they really know what they're doing? We did have a little bit of a problem in one case where somebody was getting in there and editing the information, not quite sure what they knew to do, and they did mess it up a little bit, so we had to go in there and fix it. The other part about this too is you can certainly share this virtually. I'm up in Massachusetts. The contractor working on this database analysis is down in Virginia, and we're working with cities in Cleveland, Washington, Palm Beach County, Minnesota. I mean, the point I'm making is we're using this with cities that are across the country, so it makes it a lot easier in terms of managing it from that point of view. But even within one city, I know there's one city, they have a number of engine companies doing all this data entry, and so the administrator is able to handle it there. Now, another point too that I would like to bring up, if we go to the live form here, just to show you real quick. Here's Washington's form, for example, and let me slide this over just a little bit. Sorry. And you can see that this is the actual live form where they make the entries, and then it goes down and continue. Now, in this particular case, boom, I'm going to click continue, but I didn't enter anything, so it brings up error flags saying, oh, you didn't enter all this information in here. We also generated paper forms that mirror this online form. The idea being that if they're out in the field, if they don't have a web-connected device, or they have lost connectivity or whatever, they've got a paper form they can use as a backup. It'll be just like these forms here. They just fill in the information so when they get back to the station, they can sit down in front of a computer and make all this data entry into the online form. This has worked out really well for us. There are some limitations on it that I'll talk about here in just a minute. Okay, so here I am back with you. As I mentioned earlier, we did learn a lot in terms of what the Google Forms would do for us and some of the limitations on them. Again, they're free, and there's a lot of modifications that probably can be done with a programmer. This was just me doing it. I'm not a programmer, so I was just sitting here trying to make the best use out of it that I can. Some of the things that we really would have liked is for the form to have the ability to do math. So say, for example, you go into a home and you install, 3 different types of smoke alarms or hard of hearing devices, things like that. And then one of the questions is, how many devices did you install in total? And what we would find is that the number of individual devices would not add up to the same number when they say the number of total devices they installed. So it'd be nice that if the form could do that math and auto-populate that field. And that was the other part of it too, it's auto-populating fields, especially if you're doing a lot of installs or a lot of home fire safety visits in the same address, like let's say you're doing a senior citizen park or a building or something like that. It did get very repetitious to keep entering the same information over and over and over. Now, a workaround that we did for that is that I did go in when they were doing that particular weekend and put in standard addresses for them to use, which was a workaround, and it worked pretty good. But again, auto-populating the field would be a great workaround on that. But I'll have to tell you, I think the biggest advantage of this is the ability to look at the data in real time, see how the data entry is going, seeing if there are any problems, and the ability to modify it here without having to go out into the field and worrying about modifying 10 million hard copy forms out there. This just worked out really, really well. For the next iteration on this, we're looking at the possibility of perhaps creating custom web-based solutions, something other than a Google form, something that's a little more robust, offer some of these features, or it may indeed be an app. We haven't quite figured out what it's going to be. We're looking at some various solutions out there, and I'm sure there are a lot of you out there that are already doing something along this line that we'd really be interested in hearing about. What works for you, what doesn't work for you, and certainly sharing this information would help out a lot. So, if you do have some information at the end of this little video, I'll have my contact information, and would just love to hear from you.